Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla, and today I am bringing ya another episode of Kara with Schla. And I don't know, man, life is what life do what life do, and Schla do what Schla do. That's a good way to say it. It's Friday, July 18th. I think things are going well for me, I mean, things are going to come crashing down if I get my hours cut. They're going to come crashing down, but we are fresh off of the highest amount I have ever worked in a week, and we made it. And it's only going to be higher next week. Mark my words. Mark my words. We're going to push even higher next week. They going to think I lost my mind. They gonna think I lost my brain. Seriously, they're gonna think I lost it. But hey, it is what it is. What was I thinking about today to talk about? What was I thinking? I don't know what I was thinking about. I guess I'm still kind of ticked off. We were talking about the whole gender dating expectation stuff. Sorry, I turned my AC on and it sounded like a monster just gasped for air. I don't know why it sounded like that. Anyways, we were talking about this yesterday with the whole gender expectations and dating expectations and paying expectations, and I made the correct point that in a liberal democracy, there should not be an expectation for a man to provide, or for a man to just foot the entire bill on a date. I don't think it makes any sense at all. If you have equal wages, and if every human is treated as an individual and not in these, boxes that we put them in, so this gender needs to do this, that gender needs to do that. If that's how we're treating a society, you can't maintain these premises. I ran it by GPT as well, and GPT completely agreed with me and understood what I was saying. I just think it's ridiculous. I honestly do. And where I think it comes into play is then when you think about Orthodox Christianity, or really any Orthodox religion, a lot of them have these fundamental principles like a man has to provide before they're allowed to date, or a man should be able to provide before he's allowed to date, and all these kind of stricter rules about it. Right? This is how a lot of religions operate. And I think that's interesting to note, because let's say you are religious now, you can't do it. You probably can't really date if you want to date religiously in accordance with these older rules and premises. Now, I don't know what the source was, but I remember my sister told me these things, and I'm assuming she probably watched some sermon from some guy. I don't know about the validity of it, but she made the claim that you're not supposed to date until you as a man can financially and completely provide for a woman. And I looked into it. I asked GPT that. Does it say that in the Bible? GPT said no. But GPT said it's very common with Orthodox tradition, even if it's not explicitly God said this in the Bible, it's likely a tradition type of thing. And so I think it's just completely a ridiculous standard to have, because it would mean that, so according to religion, only about 10% of men should have a marriage, should have a relationship. So we're only affording it to the 10 richest men? Right. I mean, to me, that seems, I don't know that God would want that, but I guess in some ways maybe God would want that. It's actually kind of difficult to say, right? Because I don't know. It really depends on what kind of a person God is. Because in some ways I could see how God would be down for that, but in other ways he wouldn't, because you'd like to believe that God sees all souls as equal. And if that's the case, there's no way that he would want a system where only like 10 to 20% of men can even afford to do that. You know, I assume God is not thrilled about the lack of having children. I feel like that is something very important to religion, and I think almost every religion really puts reproduction as a paramount thing to cherish. But then again, that is in their own self-interest, so I'm not sure. Again, belief systems that are not pro-birth tend to fizzle out in the long run. I know it may shock you. That that's the case, but anti-natalist movements are not very successful. They, in the long term, don't really work out. Because belief systems are most commonly passed on through parent to child, and if the parents and practitioners don't have any children, it significantly reduces the ability for belief systems to spread. So it's an important thing to note. It's definitely an important thing to note. Just trying to make a turn. Anyways. Sorry, I mean, that turn really just lost my train of thought. It took it and it threw it out the window, you know? It took like, if my brain was a piece of paper, it crimpled it up and tossed that. You know, that's what that turn did. So I'm thinking of how we navigate this, because I'm upset about it. But I wasn't thinking about it through the lens of traditional religion and the implications it has, where is technically religious ideology and a liberal democracy, are those things not compatible? Like, is there a fundamental issue between religious belief and gender equality? I think it's an interesting thing that is not really acknowledged. Like, I don't personally think that many conservatives would come out and say, well, actually, at this point, I guess some do. I guess a lot of the conservatives would come out and say it, honestly. But it's something that I guess a lot of people might not think about or really feel. And so that's why I think it's an interesting thing to acknowledge and point out. Because it's not. I mean, a lot of people, I don't think they think that way. Like, there's a lot of people who are religious within modern society, and they don't see a problem with that. But, you know, here's the kicker, though. I think it could be possible. I really do. I think if everybody was able to comprehend things, this wouldn't be an issue. Because like I've said, I mean, I figured it out. It's not like anybody had to explain this to me. And I understand that, again, things should be relatively fair. Nobody had to tell me that. But obviously a lot of people don't understand that. You know, a lot of people just don't get it and still are acting like we're living in the 1900s, but then want the standards of the 2000s. And there's a serious issue with that. There's a serious problem. And I've mentioned it before. I've talked about it a lot. It just doesn't make any sense. It just makes no sense. And so that's kind of my premise is, I still feel this way. I feel like I almost think I am liberal. Like I would self-identify as that. I don't really have an inherent issue with these beliefs. I can understand them systemically and why they would work. I don't know. I don't have a problem with that. But the difference is I see that they're not working. I just don't see how it's working. I think in order to have a liberal society, you would really need a majority of people to be pretty educated. And not only educated, but just generally smart. I just don't see how you could have, and that's basically what happens, right? Is the development, we got to a democracy, and then that just led to its own downfall, because then eventually that would lead to one spoiled generation, and once you have one spoiled generation, that's all it takes. And then people forget everything. They forget how long it took to get to where we're at, how impressive and amazing all these systems are. People just forget so quickly, and I think that's just important. It's important to point that out. So that's really how I would describe my beliefs. Is I wouldn't even deny it. I wouldn't deny that a liberal or even a socialist system is more ideal on paper, but I don't see how it translates. I just don't. I don't know if I'm wrong, but it seems like I'm right in the grand scheme of things, because I think if you create a system where conservatism still wins, which it is, at least conservative economics are winning, libertarian economics have won for a very long time in America, just consistently. They just keep winning. And nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, people are voting for this stuff. So how, in some ways, we'll have to wait to see, but could we have just voted away democracy? It's possible. And that would be a true fulfillment of my beliefs. And I don't know, I guess you could make the argument these are unique cultural nuances to America, and that it's not intrinsic for humans, but I just don't know. I just think a lot of these, a lot of the liberal ideology, it really requires a lot of thought and systemic comprehension, and I just think most people aren't into that kind of stuff. I am. I think it's super cool to learn about these things and how having things this way could be better. But when it comes to politics and articulating that in a debate and being flashy about it, it's obvious which side's going to end up winning in the long term. It's not going to be the well thought out side. And then humans at their core, I think we're learning just have a fundamental endpoint where they only want to change so much, and it just seems like people aren't really that interested in progress. I don't really know what other consensus there is for that. I don't know what else. You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm just distracted because this guy honked at me, but he was cutting in like way unnecessary. Like it wasn't even in the point where you're supposed to merge. Like I was just I have to ignore it. I have to get used to just like people doing stuff that makes no sense. Just, okay, whatever. Okay, whatever. That's how I have to be. Because it's just that's always how people are going to be. But yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it. But like I said, that's why the people who win are just always going to be the people doing the right thing. That does get you far. Working hard, staying healthy. That's what matters. And if you have bad genetics, oh well. No, I'm kind of joking with that last part, but I'm also not. I think this is an opinion I've had for a long time, but America is actually quite possibly the best country to live if you're really healthy. If you're super healthy and you don't need any medication and you're intelligent, America is probably the best place to live. We have a lot of issues. We have a lot of predatory practices on poor people. And that's not really great, is it? I was just looking into this, the credit issue. So there's a pretty large percentage of the population that just is paying a lot on interest. I mean, 40-something% of people have credit card debt. And then it's like about 11% are just chronically doing the minimum payment, which means they're accruing a lot of interest. And then I estimate it's about a third, because there's also rich people who hold a lot of credit card debt, which is kind of skews the data a little bit, because they just don't care and they don't really need to be concerned about it, obviously, so they just hold it out of convenience or whatever. It doesn't really matter if they're giving the banks money. But I'd estimate it's about a third of Americans at the end of the day who are really hurt by the credit card issue. It's about a third. And then you have a very small amount of people who are optimizers, such as myself, where we basically gain money by gaming the system with the credit. And I said before in a previous episode, I don't really agree with this. I just don't even think credit should be allowed. I don't think it leads to good things in society. It actually causes higher prices typically when you have loans available for things. Because if you didn't have mortgages, if you didn't have college loans, the prices for things would have to be lower. Because you couldn't, I mean, people would not buy them. So prices would have to come down. And so the loan issue is a part of the problem, which that's the whole irony, is a lot of these systems were instituted for the purpose of making things more accessible for poor people. But the whole loan credit system really does not do that. If you're rich, your chance of having high credit is basically guaranteed. Whereas if you're poor, it's not. It actually can be difficult to have and maintain good credit if you're poor. And that's the whole irony of the whole situation. I think we've talked about this before. It's like you get rewarded for just being richer or smarter. And that's, I don't know. I mean, I guess some people morally could justify it. I'd have to ask GPT as well. But here's going to be my estimate. My estimate is that at least 30% of Americans are direct victims as a result of credit card stuff. pretty severe direct victims, and there's probably at most 20%. There's at most 20% of people who are abusers. These are people who, like me, I would consider myself this. We have a few credit cards and we love numbers and we abuse the system to where we effectively end up paying less. I use this card for this store and this card for that store, and we end up saving money. I think it's at most 20%. If I really had to guess, I'm going to say 10 to 15. I don't know what GPT is going to say. I could be totally wrong. But I think, and then of course everybody in between, so that's what, 50%-ish? Let's just be generous. 20% of people benefit. 50%, it's like a slight detriment. It probably gets them a little bit, but they're fairly responsible about it. It doesn't affect their life too much. And then the bottom 30%, which is really more like 35, I think, but the bottom 30%, totally abused by it, just have no financial literacy, and they're just abused by it. That's how credit works. And it does cause, I think my life's better as a result of credit. I still don't think it should exist. It's not really a fair system. It's just for people who have long-form ADHD, who can, juggle cards around, and weird people who are obsessed with, crunching numbers and having a million accounts for different... I mean, I'm almost perfect for it. I only have 3 cards now, but I think I'm going to end up getting more. I bet a couple months from now I'm going to be like, yeah, guys, I just got my 5th credit card. It's really not fair. And it's kind of annoying, too, because it is extra mental effort, if you will. It's but for me, it's like a hobby almost, collecting cards. And then weirdos like me just get benefit for doing absolutely nothing, basically, for having some silly hobby because we like to collect a million different cards. It's really interesting, isn't it, what society's come to and has allowed. But yeah, we've talked about it before. It's a pretty prominent opinion of mine that loans and credit just should not exist. It does not help poor people. As much as that was the intention, it just does not help people at all. Giving a loan for college degrees increases the cost of tuition because they can charge more. It's the same thing with health insurance. How health insurance increases the amount you end up losing because then hospitals can jack up the price to ridiculous amounts. It's all a bunch of schemes, and they're not ending, and I don't think they're going to get any better. It's possible that with AI they could, but I guess I'm neutral on that now. I mean, before I was really positive, really happy that AI could come in and save everything. I'm not sure. I think I said that too when I said that, though. I was like, I'm not sure. AI could. It could fix things. It could usher in a greater sense of accountability. And it could be used to usher in a meritocratic society, which is going to be bad for a large portion of the population. But for about a third of it, it's actually going to be a better, fairer system to them. But it's not going to be as fair for most people. But I don't even know if that's how it's going to work out. It may very well just end up being continuations of these things. The same things we're seeing. It could just be a total continuation of it all. But yeah, I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm ready to get more credit cards. I just want to wait because, But I don't think it's fair. I mean, if they made credit illegal, I wouldn't be upset. because it's just I think it's just a moral issue, and yeah, like I truly believe that. I don't think that it hurts poor people. I don't understand why do banks need to siphon off money from poor people, because it's just so twisted, right? But again, part of it is siphoning money from rich people, which I'm sure people don't care about that. But it's like, really? Poor people? Really? It's crazy, though, how that works. I still can't get over it. And how much people don't even understand how it works, and I do. And I did, and I stupidly didn't get a credit card sooner. I would be, oh my goodness, I would be so happy if I had gotten one sooner. I just didn't know how it worked. But if I knew how it worked, man, I'm so ticked off about that. I'm seriously so ticked off about that. I would have been on it so much sooner, but just nobody educated me. And I guess I just thought a secure deposit card wasn't that straightforward to get. And then I realized it was straightforward, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I would have got one so much sooner. Oh my gosh, so much sooner. It's like insanity. But again, everything's so vague about that kind of stuff. At least I could teach people now. Anybody watching this video, if you can, get a secure deposit credit card and max the deposit. Some are $5,000, some are $2,500. It's usually somewhere in that range. I mean, maybe some are only $1,000. I haven't really looked into many, but whatever they say the max deposit is, just max it. Best decision you're ever going to make. Well, you know what? No, I'm being a little bit I'm being a little bit sarcastic. It could be the best decision you make if you're not going to need that money and you're actually going to utilize it properly. But yeah, I guess I don't even know. I don't even know to recommend, because I would recommend credit if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, yeah, it's that's funny. The best advice I could ever give is get a secure deposit credit card. I mean, it's true. That's what's funny about it. It's true. But then I'm realizing some people may take that advice and then it won't really work out or something like that. I honestly don't know. So I don't want to be held liable. Again, I'm not a, how about we give the disclaimer? I'm not a financial expert. I'm not held accountable for any. If you heard me say something and you're going to come back and this video is going to be missing, you know? That's what's going to happen. I'm going to be like, what? I never said I'm not a financial expert. Please note, it's in the fine print. You better read the fine print. It's always important to read the fine print. That's for sure. That's for certain. But yeah, credit it's all just a joke. But it's all a progress, right, of the own nothing, be happy mantra. I mean, maybe it makes more sense. Maybe it's going to lead to a fairer society. Who knows? But for people like me, it's kind of like, kind of liked ownership. Kind of liked owning things. We'll reminisce about it in the future. We'll reminisce. It's funny I bring that up. I have not given my opinion on that, and I actually haven't thought about it too much. But here's kind of an initial rough spin on it. I do feel like in the future, that whole like own nothing and be happy thing is going to be true. There's probably just going to be automatic driving cars that pick, like, that you share. It might be like I said, they're going to have shifts timed out properly to reduce traffic. So, like, a certain percentage of people will leave at a certain time and stuff. I think I explained this before. So let's say one person will leave at 9:28 a.m. and 36 seconds. And then another person will leave their house at 9:38 and 22 seconds. You know what I mean? And they're going to time it in a way to reduce traffic as much as possible. Because right now you just have like, oh, everybody goes to work at this time and everybody comes home at this time. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. There's probably people who don't even want to do it that way. There's probably plenty of people who might rather have a 10 a.m. to 7. And then there's some people who might rather do a 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. You know what I mean? So that's going to happen in the future. And the driving will be perfect because it'll be automatic driving cars, but it won't be your car. It's going to probably drive multiple people to and from, because everybody having their own car, I think, is just, it's actually really inefficient, and I don't think it's something we think about very often. It might even be motorcycles, honestly. It might be vehicles that look like a motorcycle, but they're not quite a motorcycle. You know, it would be like a one-seat car. This chamber, right? And so since they would be so much smaller, more of them could fit on the highway. But if you imagine you're sitting in the driver's seat of your car, and it's just as wide as the other end of the center console here. Really narrow, really compact, really good fuel economy, really efficient, lightweight, easy to repair. Still roomy enough, I mean, it's pretty big for one person. And there are these shuttles that will be like work transport units, and nobody owns them, but you have to be outside ready at your time of departure, and if you're not outside and ready when the thing comes, you get a fine to pay for the wear and tear that it took the car to get there. And yeah, probably you would just pay a subscription to get your work access or whatever. And some people may not like the sound of that, but it probably would be cheaper and more efficient overall. Now, I guess you could still have your own car if you were a person who needed it, but you probably wouldn't. You would probably just... No, because, this actually makes a lot of sense. I haven't thought about this before, but I actually think this is like a random genius moment kind of near the end of the episode. Think about how much sense this makes. Because think about what we're doing now. We just get SUVs, and then most of the time, we're not even utilizing all the space. It makes no sense. Most of the time. Most people have a way bigger car than they should have. And most of the time, it's just extra wear, because obviously suspension gets more wear with a bigger, heavier vehicle. Brakes get more wear with a bigger, heavier vehicle. Tires get more weight. There's more weight on the tire. I mean, everything just gets more worn on a bigger vehicle, and you're getting worse mile per gallon. It's costlier. Usually there's a bigger engine in a bigger vehicle. It's more expensive to repair. So in this future, you'll have these single-seater work shuttles that will be completely automated, and they'll transport you to work, and you'll get out, and then it'll transport the next person, and it'll be calculated in a way where there's a minimum amount of these shuttles needed. They'll calculate the least amount needed and the most efficient routes and stuff like that, so the cost is going to be lower. That's what's going to happen. The cost of these vehicles is going to be so much lower because you're paying a subscription for it, but so is everybody else who's driving the vehicles. And so, yeah, I mean, this could save people so much money. Wow. I actually can't believe this isn't implemented already. Like, I'm really getting excited about, I hope you guys understand how crazy, like, this is such a good idea. This is literally such a good idea. And then if you needed a bigger car, you would just rent it temporarily. You would say, hey, I'm buying a sofa. Hey, I'm buying a TV. I need an SUV to store it. Hey, I want to go on a vacation with my family. Can we have a 7-seater for 2 weeks? And then you'll just pay for it temporarily, and it'll be a car that other people had used too. But yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. And I'm telling you, it would be cheaper. It would be cheaper, and you wouldn't have to worry about any repairs or anything, because that would just automatically be taken care of. Just in your subscription. So I think that's why they're getting people used to this subscription idea. Because in the future, that's how now it's probably going to get exploited. You know, I'm saying this is talking about the optimal version, but it is probably just going to get exploited, and you're basically going to live as a debt slave your entire life. And, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It could hypothetically be a way better system, and I think even now a lot of people would choose that. It would obviously have some auto-cleaning feature, you know, since it is AI. But be great for the environment. It would cost less. And yeah, there's not a single downside to it. It's actually really frustrating that isn't already the case. Like, I think this is one of my better ideas. So that's hypothetically how the own nothing, be happy thing could work. However, the glaring issue with that is you're not going to have personal property in the same way. And then you kind of get to argue is, what kind of currency? Like, this is probably a post-capitalist society, or it's going to be semi-capitalist, because you're probably going to be able to buy some things, but you're not going to, things would probably be pretty clean and efficient at that point. There wouldn't be, like, junk in stores. Yeah, maybe I think shopping as we know it would be fundamentally different if we progress enough to get to this point. I think shopping would be so different. It probably would not. You'd probably just order things that you customly wanted, so there'd be no waste. Yeah, like you wouldn't be shopping. You would just AI generate things or fantasize about things in your imagination, and then you'd probably just have that made. And there'd probably be an efficient way to do that too, where it would be virtual. So maybe we'd work, and then we would literally... Yeah, you know what? I actually completely see this as a trajectory too. Money would just be kind of in the form of, like, Steam dollars, iTunes, Apple dollars, Roblox money, Robux. Like, and then you would have virtual items, and they would seem real. And then that's what you're, like, working for nothing. I totally see that as the progression we're heading to. You have subscriptions. You don't really own anything. You don't own anything real because of pollution or whatever. And then there's no junk or waste because it's all just digital. It's not real. And you're going to work, but you're going to be paid digitally. And then there's not going to be physical stores, but there's going to be digital environments that are like a store, but you won't be able to tell the difference. And that will be your reward for working. But in reality, you're not actually buying anything. You're just buying these digital... Yeah, that's probably how things are going to be. And I guess hypothetically it is better. But it's not better. You know what I mean? But hypothetically it could be. You just wonder what work would be like. What would you do for work? And again, it comes back to the question of if humanity would get that far. But I'm sure there's work that humans would still need to do, and that would all be allocated and calculated by the AI. You know, it's interesting to think about that, though. That is probably how things are going to be. I almost want to make a video on that. I probably will. It's just such an interesting concept, and it makes more sense if it wasn't exploited. Because think about all the anxiety that reduces. Like, your car would never break down because it's not like there's different brands of cars or anything like that. There's just one car that's meant to be cheap and have a lot of longevity and work well, and you'd have so many different AI sensors and predictors that would be able to tell if a certain part wasn't doing well or something. And yeah, there'd be a lot less anxiety for sure when it comes to car stuff. I can't believe. I'm sure somebody else has thought of this before. I don't think I'm the first person, but I'm saying I didn't hear it from anybody else, so that's why I guess it feels very special. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, but it's just such a good idea. Now, it obviously reduces... You can play devil's advocate a lot. I mean, I don't particularly like the idea because I like people having interesting cars. I wish I had an interesting car. I hope I do someday. But, you know, for now I just have like a regular daily commuter car. And yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of character away from things. Like, you want to have your own car. You want to pick a brand and a model that resonates with you. But maybe it's only going to be something for the richer people or something like that. I don't really know. But then nobody would care. So it would change because nobody, like, the AI shuttle would probably have little or minimal windows, and then even if you chose to look at it, you'd probably just be looking at a screen. You probably wouldn't even be looking out the windows, so it wouldn't matter if a rich person had like a fancy car to flex. Isn't that crazy? How it just doesn't even matter? I just think that's so funny. Because it's something that matters now, but it only matters because we see other people's cars. But it actually wouldn't even matter. Nobody would care if they had a nice car or not in this system. Wow. Anyways, it's been Schla, but now it's time to buy Schla. So see you, Schla.